going live to Facebook and YouTube now. And let me start the Zoom meeting. Well, the Zoom meeting's actually started, but I need to let some people in. Admit all. Good morning, and welcome. It's week 3. We're about to get started. I had to take my watch off because every time I move, I hit this desk, and I don't want to scratch it. It's a beautiful device. Hey there, how you doing? So, just like last week and every week, we are going to wait until 10 minutes after, or 5 minutes after, right? Is that what I said? 5 minutes after? So we'll wait until 5 minutes after to really get started, but for the benefit of the folks who are here now, either online or in the Zoom meeting or in the classroom, if you have any questions or comments, anything you want to talk about, this is your time. By the way, can you guys hear me online? Can somebody, Kanika?
Yeah, we can hear you. I have a question.
Awesome.
If we signed up for the 11:30 class, like originally, are we like supposed to be in person at that class, or can we just do the online version right now?
That is such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. I've been wanting to answer that question all week. So let me answer the question with a little bit of background. I had a meeting this last week with my boss. This is the person who invited me to teach this course. He's a good friend of mine, but he's also the person I go to when I have issues. And one of the issues I had this semester is this is an in-classroom, face-to-face class, and everyone who signed up for this class signed up for face-to-face. But then we had the soft opening, we had Omicron, we had kind of a big change there. So we had a 2-week window where I was given the flexibility to do whatever I needed to do. And what I did was I took a vote because I feel like I'm a Democratic kind of guy. And you know how the votes came in, right? We've talked about it. About 60 to 70% said we would prefer online, on demand, asynchronous. We don't want to have to show up in class. We don't want to have mandatory attendance. So I thought, okay, that's cool. But then there was a small cohort of students who said, no, I signed up for face-to-face in-classroom instruction, and that's what I expect. And a few of them were upset because they felt like it was kind of a bait and switch, where they were sold one thing, but they're getting something else. So, I talked to my leadership about it, and we all agreed that even if there's one student who signed up for in-class and demands to have in-class, even with one student, even if 99 out of 100 said they wanted the other version, we really didn't have an option this semester because that one person is right. It's more than one person, by the way. It's a good number of people. So there were 2 options. One is online on demand. The other was in-class, mandatory attendance. But then the third option that some of you chose that wasn't really an option was both. And so I thought, well, how can I deliver both? It's a lot more work because it's just different. Trust me, if you ever did my job, you would know it's different to do online versus in person. The management of the classroom is very different. So I didn't feel comfortable committing to doing both. So after having this chat with my leadership, we were all in agreement that we have to do in class, face-to-face. However, because I have the flexibility of saying how I run the classroom, I'm saying that you can do the online course if that's what you want to do. I'm going to try to record both sessions or stream both sessions, both the 10 a.m. and the 11:30 a.m. So it's all the same content. So if you're watching on Zoom or you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on YouTube, either now or later, because this will be posted in our playlist on YouTube. So it doesn't matter to me how you watch this weekly Zoom meeting. However, it does matter to me that you watch this meeting, that you be present not present as in here and now. I don't care when you watch it. However, you need to watch the Zoom meeting every week, because this is where I'm going to answer questions about the assignments, any issues that you have in the classroom, and this is where you're going to get kind of my lectures about the content. So today I'm going to show you a screen show, a keynote, a PowerPoint, and it's going to have a bunch of bullet points. But if you're not here, if you don't watch this, even if I gave you the presentation, if I gave you my presentation in a PDF, you'd have the bullet points, but you wouldn't have any of the dialogue, any of the conversation, any of the lectures. So that's what this meeting's going to be. This weekly Zoom meeting is where we do the stuff we would normally do in class, including kind of have a lecture. So for those of you who are here, thank you for being here. You have to put up with, because of this approach that we're going to take this semester, you have to put up with all this gizmo stuff that's in front of the classroom. And I apologize for that. And trust me, it's not the ideal way to teach for me, because I have to come and set up all this stuff and pay attention to it and be kind of present with all of this stuff. So I'm happy to do that for you because that sounds like what you guys wanted was the ability to have the option of online, on demand, show up when you want, consume the content, do the homework, learn the principles, and basically pass the course. But for those of you who said you want to be in class, that's important to you, please show up, because right now we have 8 students in this room, and this is a 54 student cohort. So I'm not complaining about that. I'm just saying that, the majority wants online. A small cohort wants to be face-to-face, but every single one of you who are enrolled in this course, both in the 10 a.m. and the 11:30 a.m., you all signed up for face-to-face in class mandatory attendance. So I'm not going to hold you to that because I don't know how. It would make a lot of extra work for me to say, okay, these 8 students have committed to be in the classroom, so blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to do that. So in, class participation, I'm going to follow you around all semester and make sure you participate. And I have a system to do that, but I'm not going to require that you, really, I'm not going to take roll, basically. I'm going to trust that you want to learn what I want to teach you, and I'm going to trust that you're going to do your homework and you're going to do your assignments. And believe it or not, I do have a great system to know whether or not you are participating and doing your homework and keeping up with the assignments. So that's that. Hopefully that answered your question. Did that answer your question, Janika?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Any follow-up question? Any concerns about that? Anybody?
I just had a quick question.
Please.
So I know on the money study group for like week 3, there was a thing you're supposed to submit.
Yeah.
Like a document.
Yeah,
So I know.
Can I just say before you go on, whatever the question is, that assignment that was in money study group has been changed. It's now just content. I think that was the baby steps, Dave Ramsey's baby steps, and I set it up as an assignment where you could turn in a file, and that's no longer true. Now it's just content, and that was my mistake. So what was your question, and did I answer it?
Yeah, no, it was just that like it wouldn't let me start in like the week 4 one because it said that it was still under review.
Correct.
But I guess since you changed it, I think it should be fine now.
Yeah, and why don't you jump in if you can, jump in now and see if that's correct and affirm for me and for the folks who are on this call and in this class that is correct. I had a student yesterday with the same issue. I jumped in and I corrected it for the purpose of letting you go forward because that assignment was messing up your progress. So I fixed it, and I think it's fixed, but please check and make sure. And if you can, just chime in. Anyone else? Any other questions?
Yeah, I know it's fine now.
It is fine?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. It's now 10:08, so I'm going to see if there are any other participants that want to join, and if they're, okay, it looks like everybody's in who wants to be in. Chat. Okay. Let's get started. Any questions here for those of you who are blessing me with your presence? No? Okay. Let's get started. We're going to talk about credit and debt. So this week, one of the things we're going to talk about is your assignment for this week. But I want to set the table in today's conversation, in today's lecture on credit and debt. With the big idea, really, I want to introduce you to one of my concerns about the topic today. And so, how many of you know your credit score? I see a couple, 3. So 30% of you know what your credit score is? That's probably not true. Probably more than that know what your credit score is, because it's super easy to figure out what your credit score is, and it's actually free now, right? So we're going to talk about your credit score, where it comes from, how it's developed, but we're also going to talk about a credit report. And those are two different things. So one of the things I want you to understand today as we go through this topic, and it's an important topic. Credit and debt is important for all of us. It's really important for you. So as we go through today's lecture, you're going to see some things that I think are important for you relative to credit and debt. But the first distinction is the difference between a credit report and a credit score. So when I say credit report, I want you to think credit report. That's a ton of data, information about you that comes from different places. And that's what makes up your credit report. And that information shows up in an actual report. Now, how many of you have obtained a credit report? One? When did you do it?
It was probably about 6 months ago.
Okay, cool. Go ahead, Charles.
I'll say I have.
You have not?
I have, like about a year ago.
Okay, cool. Cool. And I know, Charles, from my interaction with you, that you're very, very cautious about where you share your information, correct?
That's correct. It was a military thing.
So when you checked your credit report, was that one of your concerns, one of your priorities, to make sure that your identity hadn't been stolen, your credit hadn't been hacked, that you were in a good place? Was that one of your reasons for doing that, Charles?
Yes, and after I found out some things going on, I froze them.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So I can see now why you're so cautious about, so Charles and several other students have a concern that's a valid concern about linking your accounts, whether that's in mint.com or on the Bayrock portal, which are two very similar pieces of technology which allow you to take your accounts, your credit cards, your credit unions, your investment accounts, your savings accounts, whatever, and link them or aggregate them into your financial plan. But to do that means you have to enter your credentials on a platform. Now, whether you trust me or not, I am a licensed securities dealer, which means I have a very high level of compliance, regulatory compliance, and so on. And the business in general has a high level of regulation. But that doesn't mean you're safe, because we've all heard of Bernie Madoff, right? And Bernie Madoff basically had a Ponzi scheme going because he was running his own books. So there's good reason for all of us to be very careful. But I just want you to know that I wouldn't ask you to give me that information if I had any thought that you'd get hacked. But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen. I'm going to share some things with you today that did happen so that you can know. But Charles, I just want you to know that your purpose for doing your credit report is probably the most valid and important reason that this week's homework is what it is. So this week's homework is everyone's going to get a credit report. It's free, and we're going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about credit scores, credit reports, the data that's in them. But first, let's review a couple of things we've covered already. So how many of you are familiar with the 3 laws of personal finance? Have you guys see the video, 3 laws of personal finance? think everybody should have seen it by now. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We will review Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps quickly. I'll talk a little bit about some of the distinctions in each of those steps that I think will help you have a greater comfort level, but also just to be familiar with those simple 7 baby steps that can help you. If you didn't learn anything else this semester and you learned those 7 baby steps and you decided to take action on them, you would be exponentially ahead of the game, way ahead of the game from where you were when you came into this course. So it's kind of like a course within a course, these 7 simple, basic baby steps. So we're going to review those. And then I'll answer any questions about homework. But if you didn't already ask questions about homework or assignments or anything relative to kind of housekeeping, let's save those for the end, please. And then we'll talk about the capstone assignment a little bit, and we'll talk about the capstone assignment a little bit, and then I'll make sure you understand this week's homework. So that's what we're going to review. Here are some essential elements of personal finance. I call them the 3 laws of personal finance. And the first law of personal finance is the law of spending and saving. And it basically says save more than you earn. Wait a minute, no. Does anybody know what that law is? Can anybody repeat it? The law of spending and saving?
Yes.
Thanks, Charles. What is it?
The first one says spend less than you earn and save more for what matters most.
Yep. And I try to say it this way: save less. Wait a minute. Spend less than you earn, right?
It's a tongue twister.
It's a tongue twister. And I thought I had it burned into my mind and my heart, but obviously it's a tongue twister. Spend less than you earn. And if you read the backstory about where that law came from, you read about my friend Sam Baird, who passed a few years ago. And he was one of my friends. When I got this assignment to teach this course, I was like, I feel passionate about it, but I want to make sure that I teach the students what matters most. And he's like, there's only one thing you need to teach them. Sam, my friend, who was incredibly smart. He was an engineer, and he was a dear friend, and I miss him a lot. But he basically said, there's really one thing you need to teach them. Now, Sam was from Ireland. If you know anything about Ireland, the people in Ireland are very stoic. They're very frugal. They're very... he was an engineer, so he was in spades all of those things. And he basically believed, having moved to America, he was a dual citizen, but he raised his kids in the United States, and his perception was that we are so screwed up in the United States because we have this idea that you can spend whatever you want and you don't have to ever be accountable or responsible for what you spend. And so Sam was like, Jim, if you teach the students this one thing, you will have accomplished more for them and their life and their future than anything else you could teach them. Only one thing you need to teach them. And that's the first law of personal finance. Spend less than you earn so that, and Charles, the so that part is pretty important here, so that you can save more for what matters most. And that's one of the things I wish I could spend the entire semester helping you really unpack, is that when you spend without any budget, without any accountability, without any prioritization, anybody know anybody that does that? That just spends money without really thinking about, do I need it? Is it important to me? Will it improve my life? When you spend without any clear plan or prioritization, you end up with a bunch of junk that's going to depreciate. You're going to pay taxes on it. It's a very expensive lifestyle. But in our culture of consumerism, that's how we live. We see something we want to impress people that we may not even know, who don't really care, but that's kind of how we live. The cost of looking good and not looking bad and all the trinkets that we have is a very expensive lifestyle. So this first law of personal finance is fundamental. Like my friend Sam said, if I could teach you one thing, this would be the law that you'd want to learn. And if you look around, while it's the most important law of personal finance, hold on, Kenneth. While it's the most important law of personal finance, it's also the most disregarded law of personal finance in the United States and other places of the world. Kenneth, you had a question? Yes? Kenneth? Apparently not. I'm going to mute you then. I'm just going to mute you, Kenneth, because you're looking like you want to say something. If you do, unmute yourself. I think you can unmute yourself. All right, here we go. So that's the first law. Second law is the law of tax advantage investing. We're not going to spend any time on it today, but I just want to say that as a certified financial planner, as somebody who was born on April 15th, does anybody know what April 15th is?
Tax day.
Tax day, yes. And my first child, my first son, was born on December 31st. Do you know what that means? So you get a child tax deduction. At the time, it was $1,250. It wasn't a deduction, it was a credit. $1,250 in my pocket from the IRS. And I had my son on the last day of the year, but I got this tax credit for the entire year and a tax deduction. So I was born on April 15th. My first son was born on December 31st, meaning I get a deduction for the entire year, even though he never even went home from the hospital. That's pretty cool. I learned about tax deductions. It's a very important part of personal finance is tax. And so anyway, tax advantaged investing is something that it's one of my wheelhouses. It's a very important part of building wealth, and I'm going to teach you about it so that you understand it well enough to get started once you get your job after you graduate. So that's the second law of personal finance. And the third one is really the most important. And they're all very important, but the third one is the one that makes things happen. It's the law of purpose and commitment. If you have a clear purpose and you're willing to commit to what matters most, then you have a plan. If you're clear about what matters most, if you have a clear purpose in your life, if you know what your life is about, and you're willing to do the next thing and learn the basic disciplines and do the basic disciplines, your life will be very different than if you don't have this third law of personal finance. So we're going to talk about that throughout the semester. All right, here go the 7 baby steps. And I want to, as we go through these, I'm going to talk a little bit about each one, but I'm going to try to ask you questions. And I would love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your observations about these 7 as they populate the screen. Looks like there's one more somewhere, but I don't see it. Maybe if I tap, there it goes. All right, so there they are, all 7 of the baby steps. I should have shown them one at a time because we're going to talk about them one at a time quickly. So y'all familiar with these, right? Were they helpful? I got a lot of comments from students that said they were helpful for you. I hope they were. This is Dave Ramsey's basic plan. Dave Ramsey is someone who I think I shared with you guys that I've been teaching this class for about 10 years, and we taught Dave Ramsey's content from the very beginning. And students paid $100 to have this online course, and it was all the content, and the 7 baby steps were the core pieces of the training. And so they're still very valid, they're still very helpful, and so they're still part of the course. So the 7 baby steps, the first one is save $1,000 in an emergency fund. So here's what I want you to do. As we talk about this one baby step, this is going to be this week's class collaboration. So how you answer this question is completely up to you. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. After we talk about this, you're going to have a better idea of what it really means to build an emergency fund. But my ask this week for class collaboration is I want you to communicate in a little post, very brief post, what you would suggest to your roommate, to your best friend, to your potential spouse, and to your future self. Okay, so as you learn what this means and how to do it, I want you this week to take the opportunity to communicate in a post, as if here's what I would recommend. When it comes to having an emergency fund, here's what I would recommend. And think about you giving advice to your future self. So I'm 59 years old, and if I were able to say to myself when I was your age, here's what I think about an emergency fund. Here's what it is. Here's how it should be set up, and here's what I would do right now. So kind of those three things. What is it? How does it work? And what am I going to do? If I were you, what would I do right now? Now, obviously, you might want to get personal and share your actual, here's what I'm going to do. That would be awesome. You can do that in Money Study Group where it's not public. It's only for the course, for the students in the course. So you can do it on Facebook. You can do it on YouTube. I don't care where. Not GroupMe. It's not for GroupMe. GroupMe is for questions about the class and all that. So if you want to just give that advice to your roommate, that's great. If you want to come right out and say, hey, this is a big, important baby step, and here's what I want to do this semester. Because at the end of the day, that's what I'm really asking you to do, is to make a commitment on this one baby step so that this semester, each and every one of you makes a commitment, creates a goal, and says, I'm going to save this much money this semester in an emergency fund. So the emergency fund is separate and distinct from your checking account. It may even be, it should be, I would recommend that it be separate and distinct from your bank account. Like you should have a separate account, one that's not connected to your debit card for your emergency fund. Why do you think why would I say that? Any? Yeah. So I guess first we should talk about what's an emergency. Like what would you say qualifies as an emergency?
Your dog has an accident, so you take it to the vet.
Your dog has an accident, you take it to the vet. Yep, that's not in the budget. It's an unforeseen expense. Clearly, if you love your dog the way I love Lucy, my dog, I would not hesitate. And if I didn't have the money, if it was going to screw up my budget, I need to have some excess somewhere, and that would be, I think, a good one. What? Anyone else? What qualifies as an emergency?
Like your car going out.
Man, I cannot hear you through that
Like
mask.
your car going out.
Your car going out?
Like an engine or something around there.
Yeah. So your car breaks down and you need that transportation because you have a job or you have to go to school because you have mandatory attendance. So yeah, transportation, your car breaks down, that would be an emergency, unforeseen expense. Now if your tires wore out, would that be an emergency fund? Or would that just be poor planning? I need new tires, they're worn out. That's why you have a budget. That's why you have to think about your transportation budget, like how much am I going to need to spend this year? And if you're driving a car and you know that your tires are going to have to be replaced, that shouldn't be an emergency fund thing. That should be a planned expense, right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. The emergency fund is for emergencies. So some friends come over and everybody's hungry and we need beer and pizza. Which one of those is the emergency? The beer or the pizza? Food to sustain you. Neither? Okay. But doesn't it turn into an emergency fund pretty easy if you have the money in your checking account and your debit card, you open your app and you see you have an extra $50? Does that not become an emergency for you? It's not part of your normal spending to be the guy or the gal who buys the pizza and the beer for all your friends. That's what you want to do because you want to feel like everybody loves you. You want to be liked. You don't want to look bad as a cheapskate, right? I mean, I think we've all been there. I know I have, even when I didn't have the money to do it. So that's not an emergency. Do you see why it's helpful? Do you guys agree with that? To set up an emergency fund that's separate and distinct, one that you have to kind of reach for to get the funds, because otherwise the definition of an emergency can be somewhat vague. Do you agree with that? So now my question is, now that you have, so it could be your credit union, it could be a savings account in your bank account. Let's say you bank with Chase. You could set up a separate account, a savings account. But the problem is that savings account is going to be the protection you have for your checking account if you overdraft, if you spend too much, right? It's just going to automatically tap into it, which is why I say maybe while you're starting out and building this discipline in your life, maybe it makes sense to set that up at a different bank. I don't know. But that's what I want you guys to think about this week. I want you to think about this idea of an emergency fund. I want you to be honest with yourself as you give this recommendation, this suggestion, this instruction to your future self or your roommate or your future spouse or your actual spouse or the person you're going to spend your life with or whoever you care about. Maybe it's your brother, your cousin, whoever. I want you to think about how you would communicate to them about an emergency fund and how it fits into your financial planning and your future. And I want you to be detailed enough to tell me how much you would save for your future self and where you would put that money and why. So I want you to give me a little bit of a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, saying this is what it is, this is how it works, and this is how you should do it, future self, okay? And if you want to come right out and declare, hey, this makes sense, I'm going to do this semester, I might give you extra points for that. I would love to hear you declare that. But most of all, what I would love to see is that after this semester ends, a year from now or whatever, that you guys are like, hey, I made some decisions that semester, and they really mattered. And this is one of those decisions that really matters, okay? The debt snowball. Any questions about emergency fund before we move on to I'm going to go fast through the rest of these. Any questions? So the debt snowball, you're going to actually get to practice the debt snowball. I'm going to teach you how to use your online planning portal to put into practice the debt snowball. So you're going to know that. You're going to see how it works in real life using your financial plan. So I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot now because we will talk about it again when we do the Credit Crush assignment. So number 3 is 3 to 6 months expenses. So it's the same thing as an emergency fund. It's just now that you've graduated and you're taking baby steps, you're getting stronger, you're building more wealth, you're building your financial plan. That's step number 3, is to go from, if you're a student, maybe $500 is what you want to have in your emergency fund. Maybe that's perfect for you right now. But once you get a job and you start having a real income, you're going to want a more substantial emergency fund. And so then you want to start out with $1,000 or maybe $2,500. But then soon after that, step number 3 is 3 to 6 months expenses. And I cannot tell you how important that has been for people that I know who've had a major emergency. So we're not talking about the dog or the car now. What are we talking about? Lost your job. Now you've got all these bills, you've got this budget, you've got all these expenses that rely on you to work, and you lost your job. How did you lose your job? Maybe got fired. It's going to take a while to get another job. What else? How did you lose your job? They laid you off. You got injured. Like maybe you're like me and you drive a motorcycle and you weren't paying attention and you hit a slick spot and you went down and you're out of the game for a while and you can't go to work. So maybe at work you have some disability protection, but maybe you didn't do that. Maybe you didn't protect yourself in that way, and so you don't have any disability protection. Now you really need some money set aside, not just $1,000, but 3 to 6 months of income. And if you really get injured, what else? You said get injured. What else could prevent you from being able to work besides an injury? It starts with an I. Yes. An injury and an illness are 2 different things. Some illnesses can prevent you from ever working, right? So that's 3 to 6 months expenses. It's part of this. It's one of the 7 baby steps because it's a really important piece of personal finance. It's a really important piece of personal finance. financial planning. So the next thing is invest 15% in retirement. That's for the very way down the road future. So when you get to be old, like me, you have money set aside so that you can change your life and do whatever you want to do. And you don't have to work if you don't want to work. If you love working, like I love working, then you get to pick and choose what you want to do and where you want to work and yada, yada, yada. But you got to put yourself in a place where you're independent. That's what this is. It's all about financial independence. And this is how you get there. You put 15% of your income into I'm going to get old fund. I'm going to have a life change at some point where I'm going to do what I want to do because I'm financially independent and I'm allowed to do that. So 15%, how does that sound to you guys? Does it sound like a ton? How do you feel about that? Does that seem totally unreasonable? So how are you feeling about it? How are you feeling about that there, Zoom folks? 15% invested in retirement? Okay.
Wait, is this based on salaries wise or just?
Yeah, 15%. So let's say you get your dream job and you've done your research, which you're going to have to do this week, a little research to figure out where are you going to work when you graduate, and assuming you get the job in your major that you really want to get. If you don't know by now, you will need to know by the end of this week. What is the salary, Charles? What is the expected salary range for someone who's a professional in your industry, your major, who gets the job they want after they graduate? How much will they make? So let's just make an assumption. While you guys are doing the research, I'm going to make an assumption that you get the job you want in your industry. And I'm going to use this assumption because the math is super easy. I'm going to assume you make $100,000 a year. So how much should you be saving for retirement? How much? 15 grand. So that's it. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. Now my question is, Charles, great question. Now that we clarified 15% of what, how do you feel about that?
Honestly, I don't think it's realistic because I believe that. I don't believe. I think that as long as the more you move up in the social economic ladder, the more responsibility you have. Somebody, let's just say I just graduate and I get my ideal job and I'm getting paid $100,000 a year. Now that would mean that I'm having a lot of money to pay off my school loans and other there is just a lot of places that money is going into. So I don't think that I will be able to make that 15 grand. I don't know. It just, to me, it just seems like, the more money is coming out, the more money is coming in, there are more responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah, and those responsibilities, do they boil down to choices? Or are they absolutely required regardless of your free will?
It would be I would say the majority of them would be, necessities in terms of bills that you have to pay. But I do see your point, is also when people start making more money, they tend to spend more money because they think they have more money.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you were here last week or if you watched last week's Zoom meeting, I told you the story about my friend JD. He lived in a little house. He drove an old minivan. He coached my son in Little League. I coached his son. We were coaches together. And I was this State Farm agent in the second richest zip code in the country, okay, in Clear Lake, Texas, 77062. All these people that were my clients who lived in really nice houses and drove really nice cars, more than one. And they were members at the country club. And I assumed, what did I assume about these people that lived in the really nice houses and drove really cool cars and were members at the country club? What did I assume about them, Charles?
That they were wealthy.
That they were wealthy. But what did I learn about those people from the story I told you about JD, the guy that lived in the small house and drove the minivan? And what did
JD was more wealthy than they were.
Yeah. And when I thought back to the book that I read in college, which turned out to be one of my most favorite, impactful ideas, is The Millionaire Next Door. I'm like, I just met the freaking millionaire next door. I just met him. And I decided then and there that I wanted to be one. Because, Charles, the distinction is between the wealthy and the people that spend everything they make is this. The people that become wealthy make a decision. They make a choice. They exercise that third law of personal finance. And they decide that they're not just going to go along with what everybody else is doing. And now that they're making $200,000 or $300,000, they got to spend more. No, they make one decision early on, like JD did, that he's going to save as much as he can. And he let the IRS make the rules, which I'm going to teach you more about. And one of the reasons I want to find out how you feel about this 15% is because I want you to feel, just like Charles is, I want you to feel the weight of saving 15% and thinking, okay, when I'm making 100 grand, saving 15 grand, like Charles says, that's not really doable. That doesn't seem realistic. I want you to feel the weight of that, because as we move forward, I'm going to show you how it becomes super easy to do that in a way that will make you go, oh yeah, I can do that, because you can do it. And I'm going to show you how it's a lot easier than it sounds. But when you just look at this bullet point, you think, yeah, that's not realistic. And I get that, and that's good. I want you to feel that, because I want to come back later and take that anxiety away from you. So trust me on this one. It's an important step, and I'm going to teach you how to do it so that day one, when you get that job, you will start doing it with a high level of clarity and confidence that will give you a tremendous amount of contentment in your financial life, because you'll know that what you're doing is going to take you someplace that you really want to be. So it's a very important step. The next one, it's there. Fund college for your kids. I'm not going to say much about that. My oldest son, the one that was born on December 31st, he went in the Army, and the Army paid for his education. I'll tell you, my second son went to college. I paid for his education. He failed every class. Didn't turn out to be a great investment, if you ask me. So it's all about your kids. If you're going to put money aside for your kids' education, I wouldn't earmark it for college. I'm not saying college is bad. I'm just saying every kid is different. My brother, Ed, he's way wealthier than I am, and he never went to college one single day. He graduated from high school, went to work in a flooring company, learned everything he could learn about that business, and then set up his own business. And then he sold the business, and then he bought it back, and he's made millions on top of millions throughout his lifetime. He works really hard. He does what he wants to do. He has an amazing life. Never went to college. He educated himself on the job, and I think that's undervalued in our culture today. I think when I went to college, it was really important. I understood the value of working and learning skills and letting somebody pay me to learn skills. And then I took those skills and I developed them, and I started providing some value, and I started a business, and I've been successful doing that all of my life since I was 10 years old. And so funding college for your kids, I would say it, these are not my baby steps, but I would say fund education for your kids. It may be piano lessons. I've got 2 beautiful grandkids, Caleb and Maddie. I'll introduce you to them soon. But it's so much fun being with them. And I always wonder, like in my life, if there was one thing I would do differently, is I would take voice lessons. I would learn how to play a musical instrument. I'd learn how to write music and songs, because to me, there's no piece of art that's more inspiring to me than music, especially vocalists, singing. it moves me, right? And I know I would have enjoyed being able to create. I'm a pretty creative guy, but I was always worried about making enough money to survive. If I had a conversation with my future self when I was your age, and I could do that now, I would say, hey, don't forget to develop a few things in your life that are just going to give you so much dance, right? So much passion and energy and fun. Because to me, I remember one time my daughter Carissa and I, we were in our study and we were playing music super loud. It was a Christian song. It was like a worship song. And she had this amazing voice and we were singing into a hairbrush. And I'll never forget that. It was like we were enjoying singing. We were singing at the top of our lungs. So if I could live my life over, and I'm not saying it's a regret, but I'm saying to you, like, when you start thinking about educating yourself or your kids, don't forget about the things that may cost money, but they may be life-changing and life-giving, okay? So that's why funding education is a critical piece of personal finance. I'm so thankful that I get to spend whatever it costs for Caleb and Maddie to learn whatever they want to learn. And they're going to experience everything from ballet to snow skiing to motorcycle racing to you name it, horseback riding, music, instruments. They're going to experience all of it. And we'll figure out what they really like, whether it's golf or baseball or swimming or whatever. And they'll get to do, but they'll have some basic skills in a wide range of things, and that's education. And they're going to work too. They're going to learn how to make a lemonade stand like next summer. And they're going to learn how to sell lemonade. I get to teach them all kinds of things. Okay, number 6, pay off the mortgage early. Number 7, pay or build wealth and give away. That may not seem hugely important to you now, but I promise you, by the time you get old, like me, and hopefully you will experience it way earlier in life, there's a tremendous benefit of being able to give and having sufficient funds in your life where you can be generous. It's a huge thing. So it's one of Dave's baby steps, and I think it's a great step. Okay, moving on. Any questions before we move on into this week's assignment? I got to watch the clock. Man, time goes so fast. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these because this week you're going to learn about this stuff. When I post your assignment this week, you're going to see what you're responsible for learning, and you're going to get a credit report. You don't need to get your credit score. I just want to make sure you know the distinction between a credit report and a credit score. I'm going to talk a little bit about a credit history, how that impacts your credit score, and where that information comes from. We're going to talk a little bit about credit inquiries, a couple of kinds of inquiries, and I want to make sure you know about a credit list. So most of you, I know it's not all of you, but probably 75% of you already have debts like college loans, car loans, whatever. This semester, this week, I want you to make a list of your creditors. So you're going to need the name of the entity that you owe money to in one column, and I'll tell you what's in the other columns. So that's your homework assignment, is to create a credit list. So the I Love Credit. I want to talk about this for just a minute because before we jump into this week's content, before you guys start learning about credit and debt, I want you to understand that the big idea for credit scores, for example, and your credit report, the entire system is designed. Do you know who it's designed for? The credit score system. You think it's for you? To benefit you as a consumer?
No.
Charles, what do you think it's for?
I have always believed that it's not necessary for you because the credit system enables you to spend more money than you have. So I've always thought that it was designed to benefit the banks and the businesses that run these credit checks.
That's exactly right. So I Love Credit score. It's really credit. a lot of Americans think credit is a privilege. It's like something you're entitled to, but it's not. Credit is simply a product that a lot of people, a lot of institutions are doing a really effective job at selling you on. They're selling you on credit. And we're going to talk about that throughout this semester, but today I just want to plant the seed that this whole big project called your credit score and your credit report and the whole system is not designed for your benefit. It is designed 100% for the credit card companies, the banks, the institutions, the businesses who are able to sell their products to you even though you don't have the money to buy them because of credit. So that's why I say I love credit. It's not I love credit. It's the institution, the credit score, the whole business is set up for them because they want you to think that your credit score is the number one thing that matters, but it isn't. There's lots of ways to be a consumer without credit. So just for what it's worth, I wanted to suggest that be careful as we jump into credit. There are three reporting agencies. Did you guys know this? Three agencies. And so you can get a credit report every year, every 12 months from annualcreditreport.com. So just remember that, annualcreditreport.com. One of those, you can get a report from all three of them. This week's assignment is just to get one. And I would encourage you to get a credit report every 12 months. You could actually get 3 credit reports every year for free. So every 4 months you could get a credit report, just use a different provider, a different agency, right? But I'm not saying that's critical, but I am saying it's important that every single one of you, if you have a Social Security number, you get a credit report. And if you're like a foreign student, if you don't have a Social Security number, you probably won't be able to get a credit report. So your homework assignment, you have an alternate homework assignment, but only for students who cannot get a credit report. So let's talk about why your credit report matters. Charles, you've already kind of highlighted why it's important, but let's talk a little bit about it. So your credit report, unlike your credit score, is full of data, tons of data, information, little bits of information that come from all over, and people are storing, institutions are storing information on you and me every day, every time we use credit. And so that's where your report comes from, is that data. And that's what creates your credit score. So the number one reason that I'm requiring you to get a credit report this week, this semester, is because like Charles found some things that were questionable. When I did my first credit report, I found some questionable things too. And you might find some questionable things on your credit report, things that are not accurate, things that are alarming, things that make you go, whoa. So you won't know that if you don't get a credit report. So that's why we're going to do this. We're going to get a credit report. Let's see. So a couple security issues I wanted to highlight is just, does anybody know anyone who's been affected by fraud? Like, what's the number one? You want to tell me about it?
It was an older guy, and he got some sort of like email that it was like a scam.
Yeah.
They basically gave him like $20,000.
My mother got scammed about 2 years ago, and I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it was very effective, and it involved Facebook following one of her grandchildren around, who happened to be my son, and knowing things about him, so that this attorney that got her to give money had a very, very persuasive story. Charles, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
My grandma called me, I think it was a day or 2 days ago. She found out that somebody had been using her social security number to be working, and they purchased a car in her name and everything else, and she was freaking out. I'm talking about, she was like about 80 something. I'm like, I don't know what to do about that. So,
gosh, it's go ahead.
It sucks because she was freaking out. I'm like, Grandma, I don't think there's no law enforcement is going to believe that you were, you were involved in any fraud. So it's just, She was freaking out.
So there's all kinds of fraud. The grandparent scam, I think is what it's called. My mom got it. Charles' grandmother got it. It's very effective. There's also a lot of scams for college students, and they're unlimited, the number of types of scams there are. And I get them every day by email. They're called phishing emails. Hopefully you're familiar with that. Hackers get into your computer because you download something in an email. That's a phishing email would be the number one, I think, reason for a hack. One of the things I wanted to just recommend, my wife needs to know this. She's not very good at it. Maybe you're not very good at it. My mom's not very good at it. A lot of people I know are not very good at it. It's basically just updating your stuff, right? Your phone, your iPad, your MacBook. Update it. Like when they send out an update, make sure you're on the most current version. I have several websites and I use WordPress because it's easy and I know how it works. But I have lots of plugins that are part of the WordPress ecosystem. And they update WordPress, and then every single plugin in the universe has to get updated. And guess what I didn't do? When the recent update to WordPress came out, guess what I forgot to do? I forgot to go update my 16,427 plugins. It wasn't that many, but there are a lot of them. I forgot to go and just systematically update them. And so when that happens, I don't care what software you're talking about, when it's not up to date, the most important updates include security fixes. So you got to update all your stuff, and that's why it's here. And passwords is, if you use the same password, if you use the word password, I mean, use good, solid passwords and change them frequently. I know it's a pain in the butt. It is a pain in the butt for me too, but passwords are important and you have to change them. That's how you get hacked. So all of the things you can do to protect yourself from being a target, like my mom or like someone else's, there's a few things that are just things you have to do. One of them is update your stuff, change your password. So those are important pieces of the security checklist. Identity theft is a huge thing. Do you guys know who the biggest targets for identity theft are? Charles just named one of them.
Old people.
Old people. Who's the second? In fact, the number one biggest target. Nobody knows?
College student?
Absolutely, Fanisa. College students. College students are the biggest target for identity theft. Do you know why? Careless, but a little more specifically. I mean, all those things I just mentioned before would fall under the category of careless. Not updating your stuff, not updating your software, not changing your password. And there's one other big thing that a lot of college students like you have never done. What you're going to do this week.
Check your credit?
Yes. And the way you check your credit, the best way to check your credit is to grab a free credit report and see what's on it. Because it's a ton of information, and some of that information could be the red flag that saves you from the next hack or breach or one that's going on right now. So just check those. That's the best prevention, is all those things that were on that previous slide, and get a credit report. So hopefully that's helpful. Any questions, comments? Moving right along. So you're going to learn, in fact, you're going to have a white paper that's in Money Study Group. Have you seen it yet? If you haven't, it's there. It's just a white paper from the FICO people. It's pretty current. It's a ton of information. You don't have to know it all. There is a quiz, so you know if you need more information to answer the quiz, the white paper is a great source. But it's also a great place if you want to just read it and be familiar with what makes up a FICO score and how it all works. It's way more in depth than we're going to go into in this course, but it's there for your education. So these are things that your credit score is based on. How many accounts do you have? How many new accounts do you have, especially that you applied for recently? And when was the most recent account opened? Those are just some of the things that your credit score is based on. So for what it's worth. Types of credit. The types of credit you have accounts for 10% of your credit score. So that means the mix of credit that you have. There are different types of credit, and they impact your credit score a little differently. Things like car loans, mortgage loans, those are two. Revolving credit and like credit cards. And those are, it's important just to understand how they kind of make distinctions so that as you move forward and you start accumulating credit, you'll know what type of credit is actually going to benefit you. Because, so we mentioned car loans and mortgages. I'm going to focus on those for just a minute. But like car loans, when I would encourage you never to get a loan for a car. I always, one of the things I learned in college from reading the book, The Millionaire Next Door, they pay cash for cars. So they save their money up to buy the car, and cash is a great tool for buying a car. But if you get a loan for a car today, do you guys know if you buy a new car what the normal loan duration is? Anybody have a car loan recently?
Isn't it like 4 years, if I'm not mistaken?
It used to be 4 years, but I'm showing you a picture of a Ford emblem that's on a Ford F-150. This is my favorite production vehicle ever. It's actually the most popular vehicle ever manufactured in the world, Ford F-150. How much do you pay for a Ford F-150 if you buy a new one? Let's say you get a King Ranch version, the one with leather seats. 70, 80K, yeah. So if you buy this Ford F-150, the King Ranch version with leather seats, it's like the awesome vehicle. You can't pull a fifth wheel camper like a big camper, but you can pull a small camper. How long would your loan be for?
I don't know, 6, 7 years maybe?
Typically 6 years, maybe 7, but that's very different than it was when I was your age. It was more like a 4-year loan or a 3-year loan, but today car loans are much, much longer. So those types of loans, they affect your credit score more favorably than short-term loans because it gives them more data. So a mortgage obviously would be typically a much longer type of loan, and it gives them more information, especially about your payment history. So if you have a loan for 30 years and you missed one payment in 15 years, that's a pretty good indicator that you're a good risk. So that's going to make your score better. And remember, it's I Love Credit Score, so all these credit companies, they want to know, are you going to be a good risk? It's to protect them, not so much to protect you. But on the other hand, if you're applying for a mortgage loan and you have a lot of late payments, missed payments, and your credit score gets dinged or suffers because of that, you're going to pay a lot higher interest rate on your loan, so that's going to hurt you. So that's why it's important that we all pay attention to our credit score and understand how that credit score is developed. Even though the whole system is designed for them and not for you, it's like anything else. You need to be smart enough to know how it works so that you don't end up getting screwed with higher interest rates, especially on a long-term loan like a home. So that's probably the most important loan you'll ever have is for a house. It's typically the biggest asset, the biggest piece of debt you'll have, typically, unless you decide to go into debt for a business, in which case you may have significantly more. Okay, just some things that are included in your credit score. I'll let you look at those. Again, the white paper is a great source. You can scan it. You can see when you do your quiz, you might want to open that white paper up and just review it. But it's there for you just to know how the credit score system works. FICO scores are the name of the most common score. In fact, over 90% of U.S. lending decisions are made based on the FICO score. So there are other institutions that have credit scores, but the FICO score is the most common, the most popular, and the most used, again, over 90%. And they only consider hard inquiries. So let's talk about inquiries for a minute. FICO score only considers hard inquiries. That's a credit inquiry. There are two kinds, hard and soft. They only consider the hard inquiries and only the ones that are made in the last year. So credit inquiries, just so you know, there are two kinds. There's hard and soft. But these are requests for your credit report within the last 2 years, and these do impact your credit score. Hard and soft, if you want to know the difference, the hard inquiry is it occurs whenever a lender or third party is checking your credit for the purpose of lending you money. So if you go to someone and you apply for credit, they're going to pull your credit report, and that's a hard inquiry. Okay? If you just get your own credit report or your own credit score, that's a soft inquiry. So it'll show up on your credit report, but it's not a hard inquiry, and it doesn't affect your FICO score. Does that make sense? So if you want to know what affects your FICO score, you got to know what things you do, what behaviors you do that have an impact on your credit score. If you're going around applying for credit just to see if you can afford that new car, that new house, whatever, just know that those hard inquiries are going to impact your credit score. You think they're going to make them go up or down? Down. Yeah, down. Because the credit systems want to know, hey, are you out there getting ready to load yourself up on debt? The indicator for them is that you're actually getting these hard inquiries because you're trying to apply for credit. So that's how that works. Let's see, did I duplicate this? Yeah, so just remember the hard inquiry is if you're applying for the credit, okay? And they are considered by your FICO scores, but they're usually a pretty small impact because they don't mean you have credit, but they're going to impact your score. Soft inquiry, I think we already covered this. So you're not applying. So if you get a pre-approved credit, like if you didn't apply for it, have any of you gotten pre-approved credit? Like that's out of your control, right? You get an email, you bank with Chase, and they send you a free credit card. You're pre-approved for $10,000. Nobody ever got that? Yeah. So when you get those, that's going to create a soft inquiry. You'll see it on your credit report, but it doesn't impact your score. It's out of your control. So those come in the mail sometimes. They come in email sometimes. Another soft inquiry I already talked about is when you pull your own credit report or you check your score. That's going to be a soft inquiry. Okay, moving right along. I'm trying to wrap things up because we're basically almost out of time. More about soft inquiries. I think I went a little overboard on soft inquiries. So you should all know about soft inquiries, and there will be, I think, a question or two on the quiz. There's 10 questions this week. This is just a chart of the FICO score. You may know this. It's a little fuzzy, but anyway, that's in, again, the white paper that I gave you in your reading material this week. And you don't have to study that. Again, it's there for you to reference. It's there for you to understand and to go back to. And we're going to move on from credit and debt. But this week we have to focus on it because you're getting your credit report. And it's pretty important. It's not my favorite topic. I would rather not even spend time on this topic, but it is important, and that's why we spend time on it. Things are going to get much more fun moving forward after we get through this. FICO scores are calculated each time they're requested. So when somebody requests the FICO score, you request your score, the system goes out and checks to see if there's any new data, and they grab that data, and it generates another soft inquiry. And when your credit score changes, why is that there? Credit scores, FICO scores, oh yeah, they change. They change with data. So anything you do, like applying for credit, is going to change your FICO score. And whenever the data is updated with new information. So any questions about that before we talk about your creditor list? This is homework now, moving into homework. No questions? Okay, let's talk about part of your assignment this week. Again, if you don't have a Social Security number, if you have no debtors, no creditors, then you're going to do the alternative assignment. But if you have a Social Security number, if you have debtors, you're going to get a credit report, you're going to review it, and you're going to do this creditor list. And the list is just 4 columns. It's what's the name of the creditor, how much do you owe to that creditor, what is the amount of the monthly payment that you're going to pay, and when does that payment start. If it's a college loan, You just need to know when it starts. So I want you to have this list for you. You submit it to me just so I know you did your homework, but you need to know how much debt you have. You need to know how much it is and who it is owed to. I would even put the address of the lender. Now, some of these loans are going to change. The name of the lender might change. You may have a student loan that gets sold to another creditor, so you'll want to keep that list and update it. Again, this is for you. This is good housekeeping for your personal financial matters. But it's your homework assignment for this week, too. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming in the next couple of weeks as we get through credit and debt. Next week, one of my favorite assignments is you're going to interview someone in your family, preferably a parent or an uncle, an aunt, someone older than you. So we'll talk about that more next week, but that's what's coming. It's one of my favorite assignments. It's a very powerful experience where you get to have a very personal conversation with someone that you respect. The idea is you select someone in your family who you think has done a good job managing money, or someone that you trust who may have made mistakes and, made some changes. And the point is, the person that you select to interview is someone who you're asking to share their wisdom with you. So this interview is a very special assignment, and we'll talk about it again next week. It's not due this week, it's following. I'm just giving you guys kind of a heads up of what's coming. Then we're going to do a fun assignment, Consumer Beware. We're going to talk more about kind of the idea of debt and spending and how it affects your life, and I'm going to share some stories with you, some real life stories that will help kind of frame out the work that you're going to do in your capstone assignment in your financial planning portal. So this is this is a 1 week kind of assignment with some funny stories. I like telling stories, and that's what we're going to do the following week. So we're going to focus on how does it all work? What's it look like in a financial plan? And I'm going to share the story about Billy and Sally as we prepare for the Credit Crush assignment. Remember I told you about Dave Ramsey's Snowball, pay off debt using the Snowball. So this is the assignment where you're going to see how that works in a financial plan. And I think it's very powerful. And so that's what's coming. Let's see. I already talked about the credit. You can start thinking about this now, by the way. The Credit Crush assignment involves you doing 3 things. One, again, remember, you're going to be pretending that you've graduated. As you build your financial plan, you're going to be building a financial plan based on your life after you graduate, having found the job that you really want to find in your major. So you're going to have to do a little research to figure out how much money would you be making if you get the job you really want to get and you graduate. Now you're making that much money, and you're going to build your financial plan based on that, okay? And then one of the things I'm going to ask you to do as we prepare for the Credit Crush assignment is I'm going to ask you to do a little more research and go find the house that you want to buy based on the idea that you're making X number of dollars based on your research, based on the job that you want to get when you graduate. Does that make sense? So your job is then now do a little more research, go find the house in the neighborhood that you want to live in, one that you feel like you can afford. Do a little research to see how much that mortgage is going to cost, what's the interest rate, what's the payment, can you afford it, and you're going to buy that house. In your financial plan, you're going to plug in the numbers to say, I just bought this house, and this is my financial plan. This is a 30-year loan, blah, blah, blah. You're going to buy a house. The second thing you're going to do for the Credit Crush assignment, so that I can teach you the best strategies to manage debt, you're going to create some debt. It's going to be fake, but I want you to do a little research, and I want you to buy your dream car. So you're going to buy your dream house, or at least the house you feel comfortable being able to afford based on the fact that you get your dream job, right? You're going to buy a house, you're going to buy a car, you're going to buy the car you want, and you're going to go on a big spending spree with your credit cards, You can use more than one credit card. It's mostly just designed to help you understand how different strategies work for paying off debt. And you're going to be a master at debt management after that assignment. But those are the 3 things I'm going to ask you to do to create your financial plan in a way that makes sense so that you can see how it all works. And then the next week, we're going to talk about bargaining and negotiating. I'm going to teach you the principles and the process around bargaining and negotiating and why it matters in terms of the big idea of becoming a millionaire by the time you're 50. So that's what's coming, and that's pretty much it. Thank you, guys. If you don't, I'm going to sit around and answer questions and wait for my next class. If you have any questions, I'm all ears. Thank you, guys on Zoom. I'll see you next week. Janika, you have a question?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I was just going to say thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care. Okay, I'm going to jump over here and finish the recording.